Good evening, and welcome to the July 8th, 2021 public meeting of the Chatham Township Committee. I want to welcome everyone who's here and who's joining us on Zoom. I'd like to say a special welcome to Mayor Kelly, who joined us today, which was very nice to see you. Mr. LeConte, has adequate notice been given?
Yes, adequate notice of this meeting of the Township Committee was given as required by the Open Public Meetings Act as follows. Notice was given to both the Chatham Courier and the Morris County Daily Record on June 28th, 2021. Notice was posted on the bulletin board in the main hallway of the municipal building and on the front door of the municipal building on June 28th, 2021. And notice was filed with the Township Clerk on June 28th, 2021. The notice and agenda were also posted on the Township website.
Thank you. Can I get a roll call, please?
Mrs. Felice?
Here.
Mr. Hamilton?
Here.
Mrs. Fondaco?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Ewald?
Here.
We have quorum.
Can everyone please join me in the flag salute? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
I just have a question. How are the questions? Can you review again? I know you sent an email, but can you review again how the questions will be in?
The questions will be read by me, and the candidates will have an opportunity to answer.
Okay, are there going to be follow-ups?
Yes, there will be time for follow-up.
Great. So I have a motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. So logistically, I'm going to read a logistical statement because with this weather, we don't know how long we'll have power. So in the event that the Township Municipal Building suffers a loss of power and cable and Zoom access is lost, the Township Committee will be in recess until the municipal building generator restores power. At that point, if the meeting cannot be broadcast via cable and Zoom, the Township Committee, which is meeting in person at the municipal building, will decide whether to resume the meeting without cable and Zoom access, continue the recess, or adjourn the meeting depending on information from the cable and utility companies regarding restoration of cable and Zoom access. If you are viewing this meeting on cable or by Zoom and the transmission is lost, periodically check the connection. In any event, if cable and Zoom access are not resumed by 11 p.m. tonight, the meeting will be adjourned.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah. You got to be prepared for everything. Okay. So the primary purpose of this special meeting is the appointment to the Township Committee seat left vacant by Mayor Ness's resignation. The committee takes this appointment very seriously, as it is one of the most important decisions the Township Committee can make in exercising our fiduciary duty entrusted to us by our Township residents. Our committee has a lot of important business to deal with over the next few months. The continued implementation of our affordable housing agreement, the remediation of the Rolling Knolls landfill, as well as the continued improvement of aging infrastructure and more. While we had hoped to have the selection completed at our last meeting, it is more important to ensure we have a robust process that is above reproach. As the legal guidance from state statute and case law is vague and conflicting, it's best we err toward an open public meeting process. I'd like to thank the three Democratic nominees, Paul Payton, Phil Ankel, and Kathy Abbott, for shifting gears and supporting a new, more transparent process. I appreciate their cooperation in moving the process in a positive direction. I'd also like to thank the committee for their patience and their cooperation while we work through this new protocol. As outlined in the agenda, the nominee statements will be read. The statements will be followed by a question and answer period. To keep things orderly, I ask the committee to provide their questions to our clerk. The clerk will read the questions to the candidates, and they will each have an opportunity to respond. After the submitted questions are complete, the committee will have an opportunity for follow-up questions. We will then move to the nomination process. If the committee achieves a majority vote for a nominee, that person will be sworn in, and the committee will move into a mini reorganization of sorts and the selection of the mayor, deputy mayor, and the committee's planning board appointee. If the committee is not successful in selecting the three candidates, That decision will revert to the Chatham Township Democratic Committee, and they have up to 15 days to submit their appointee. We will then carry the selection of mayor, deputy mayor, and township committee appointment to the planning board to a subsequent meeting when we have our full complement of committee members. Okay, so we will get started with our candidate statements. Paul Payton was up first.
Yes, Mr. Payton was unable to be here tonight, but he submitted a written statement. Reads as follows. I am Paul Payton, 67 Candace Lane, Chatham Township, and I am honored to be nominated for the open seat on our Township Committee. I regret being unavailable this evening to answer questions, and I'm disappointed that I did not have the opportunity to do so in executive session during the originally scheduled meeting. I am a 28-year Chatham Township resident who has previously run for the committee and spent 3 years on our Environmental Commission. I am encouraged by the increased Democratic presence on the Township Committee and support the significant improvements this has brought, including accomplishments in infrastructure, open space, and a better situation regarding affordable housing. Although I believe I can serve with distinction and will do so if selected, I have supported Kathy Abbott in the past and feel that with her more extensive qualifications and long record of service, as well as her ability to plan realistically for Chatham's future, she would be the best candidate for the Township Committee vacancy. Thank you, Paul Payton.
Thank you. Mr. Uncle?
Thank you. Dear Chatham Township Committee, the Chatham Township Democratic Committee has selected me as one of the candidates to replace Tracy Ness, who stepped down because she's moving out of Chatham. And while I'll serve if selected, I think it would be more appropriate for this committee to choose Kathy Abbott to take Tracy's place. I say that because just a few weeks ago, the Democratic voters of Chatham chose Kathy to be their candidate in the upcoming election in less than 4 months. Kathy is well known, with a long track record of community service, as well as a campaign website and a wealth of public statements about key topics facing our township. And she's here tonight, of course. I know Kathy will bring her views to the committee befitting her many years of service to the community, both as a Republican and now a Democrat, I might add. As you well know, Councilmember Hamilton, the first time isn't always a charm in township elections, but I've remained engaged because I believe in this township. And as a Chatham Township Democratic community, we are focused on Chatham Township issues. That's because our Democratic elected officials and candidates are deeply rooted in Chatham Township and have many decades of loyal service to the community. They serve in our government and have led a range of local initiatives supporting our students, fostering recreational opportunities, protecting our environment, preserving green space, engaging with our senior community, and so much more. And our current candidate, Kathy Abbott, brings a further 25 years of service on issues like safe routes to schools, League of Women Voters, open space, the planning board, and has served on the Chatham Township Committee before, as a Republican, I might add. Bottom line, Kathy, like Stacy and Celeste, knows how to get stuff done. The current Township Committee Democratic-led majority, over strenuous opposition, recently approved 3 new citizen advisory committees: affordable housing, business advisory, and diversity. Each of these topics, like open space, colony pool, and others, are important to our community. Through these nonpartisan committees, this Township Committee gets valuable input, including new ideas and plans for our future. Further, as a Chatham Democratic community, we organized and participated in an open forum with our Chatham Asian community in celebration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and also to address the recent alarming rise in attacks against members of the Asian community. And while in this case we put a focus on the Chatham Asian community, no local, state, or national government can be truly representative without ensuring that all its members are heard, respected, and included. The current Democratic-led Township Committee also recently passed a budget, again over strong opposition, that finances local services in a fiscally prudent way, keeping operating expenses essentially flat. There were no significant departures from past budgets, but rather a continuation of ongoing efforts to resolve our community's affordable housing obligations, invest in key police and DPW needs, and keep our municipal infrastructure working. That budget also included funding for further open space acquisitions. Our open space in Chatham is one of the defining positive features of our community, and I'm proud that this Democratic-led Township Committee has taken strong action in this regard. I would also point out that this open space funding now matches the amount Township voters affirmed when they passed a referendum on this topic. And finally, this Democratic-led Township Committee, in collaboration with the Township Administrator, has made obtaining grants a key component of paying for critical improvements in the Township, from AC in the municipal building to funding for trails, police equipment, and other community needs. Over $900,000 worth. That's real money with a meaningful impact on our overall budget and taxes. If chosen, Kathy will bring her own perspectives to this committee, relying on her many years working on so many of the key issues facing our township. She's got a proven track record of collaboration and simply getting stuff done. That's why we're here today, to get things done and to move Chatham forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Mrs. Abbott?
Good evening, Chatham Township Committee members and Township residents. I'm qualified to be appointed to the Chatham Township Committee for many reasons. First, I know the job. I served before in 2012, 2013, and 2014. I also have the aptitude and the skill set needed to lead. I have a master's in English from Georgetown and a master's in economics from NYU. I read all meeting documents. While the committee has its township professionals to lean on, I believe in doing my homework to ensure that I understand the issue at hand, can ask good questions, and make decisions that are well informed. I pay attention to details, whether by reading municipal laws that apply to problem solving or scrutinizing developers' plans to learn the diameter of a stormwater pipe. I actively study the budget to understand the size of specific costs or why line items go up and down. I also like to learn about best practices in other similar towns and have attended the League of Municipalities conferences and even presented for the League. I write grants as a profession and volunteered to help write grants for Chatham Township that won almost $1 million in sidewalks near our schools. In addition, I know the township well. I have lived here with my family for 27 years, having moved here when I was pregnant with my first child. I've swum laps and sat with friends and played with my kids at Colony Pool for about 20 summers. I've walked and run miles on our streets and in the parks. I've cleaned up open spaces with the Environmental Commission. I served on the Environmental Commission for 3 terms, sometimes as vice chair. I serve on the planning board now. I've attended senior center events, art league events, and enjoy the historical society's events. I have met and worked with many people in the township through community efforts, such as Girl Scouts, League of Women Voters, and with the schools in the parent-teacher organization, where I founded environmental education committees such as the Farm to School Committee, Earth Day committees, and the Safe Routes to School Committee. I've also volunteered for many years at my church, St. Patrick, and I am on the advisory committee of the Great Swamp Watershed Association. Politically speaking, I'm a centrist. Times change and politics change, but most people still meet in the middle. I would be an elected leader who can work with other committee members to achieve common goals by making compromises and treating each other with respect. I'm looking forward to working with my colleagues on the projects that got moving in the last 3 years of moderate, mixed Republican and Democratic leadership. After years of a faction of Republicans kicking responsibilities down the road, the Democrats worked with moderate Republicans, bringing energy and a strong work ethic to the committee. With a group of reasonable people in the majority, the committee was able to finalize publicly supported plans to meet our latest round of state-mandated affordable housing. They also began working on much more thorough and longer-term financial plans, as well as the baffling backlog of deferred maintenance issues. We are now seeing the disturbing effects visually of rezoning and development on one of our few large pieces of land that remain in town, what was the Dixie-Dale Farm. I love the rural feeling of Chatham Township. Most of us, I would say, have come from more urbanized areas of the metropolitan area and want to keep Chatham as traffic-free and green as possible. We all know we have the Noe Pond development coming, and I will be vigilant to guide it by all of our legal planning tools. We also have more environmentally sensitive lands we need to protect and preserve, and walking trails to build. We have the 2025 mandated round of affordable housing to start thinking about. We have a recreation plan to create. I think our new advisory committees, the Diversity Committee, the Affordable Housing Committee, and the Business Advisory Committee, and all the other township volunteer boards and committees are smart resources that leverage the skills and talents of our residents. As a township committee member, I pledge to keep us moving forward together, to keep Chatham as livable, well-run, and beautiful as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. LeConte, do you have questions that were submitted by the committee?
Yes, I do. Shall we take the candidates one at a time?
Yes.
Okay.
What do you mean, so one question, both candidates? We're not going to go all the questions, one candidate. We do one question, candidate?
Well,
Is it really necessary to ask the questions to one of the candidates who effectively gave a campaign speech on behalf of the other candidate? I mean, I'm happy to hear Phil's answer. He basically said he wasn't interested in the job. But,
and in addition to having questions to ask the candidates who are here, the questions that I had this afternoon, I emailed to Mr. Payton, and I have his responses to the ones that we received this afternoon. If you want those read, I can start with that, and then we can...
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Okay, so the questions to Mr. Payton. Number one, is Colony Pool worth funding if it has lost money the past few years? He says, yes, it is worth funding. It is a community amenity. Not everything has to be profit-making. This is one item that taxes which funder government should pay for. Question number two, do you support the new resident advisory committees, business advisory, affordable housing, diversity? Mr. Payton says, my answer must be more nuanced than yes or no. If we believe that they can be staffed and maintained properly on a self-perpetuating basis, then yes. I believe in starting as you mean to continue. We shouldn't get overly ambitious and make promises we can't keep. Of these three, I see affordable housing as the most important, as we'll have another round to contend with fairly soon. I believe in trying to touch things once, or as close to once as possible, and deal with them, not kick them down the road. Planning ahead helps to achieve that goal. I'm also happy to see a much more diverse population in our town, and believe that welcoming them, as with any new neighbors, should not require rules beyond love thy neighbor as thyself. I have not yet studied the local business situation enough to offer an informed comment. Third question, a developer has acquired Noe Pond. What do you think about the potential development of Noe Pond? Mr. Payton's answer is, I think it is a terrible idea. Part of Chatham's appeal is its openness. If there is any way to maintain the current use, it should be done. For example, would the country club be amenable to buying and operating it? If that concept has already been broached, I'm sorry that I have not been keeping up on the developments there. Question number 4, do you support the 2% open space tax? Yes, absolutely. As I said above, part of Chatham's appeal is its openness. We are lucky to be as green as we are a scant 26 or so miles from Times Square. It is a gift to cherish and preserve. 2% is a very small price for a community of mostly financially sufficient people to pay for that. And question number 5, the master plan is set to be redone in the next year. What are your priorities for the master plan? And Mr. Payton's answer is, I am not well enough versed in it to comment intelligently in the context of the master plan, but I hope the end result would be to maintain the ambiance we have now that makes Chatham Township so desirable. Some random thoughts for consideration. I would like to see the rough pavement on too many of our streets restored in large batches, not piecemeal, as done with Mountain Avenue, where breaks in the pavement are appearing already after just 1 year. These repaved roads should not be widened or turned into speedways in the process. I would like to see our power grid and cable infrastructure strengthened as much as possible without massive upheaval. I know and appreciate that a lot of work has already been done. I would like to see reliable cell and Wi-Fi service in the municipal building. It is important for emergencies. These things come immediately to mind. Again, my apologies for not being available tonight. I hope these answers will suffice.
Thank you.
So that's the feedback from Mr. Payton. And Deputy Mayor, do you have a preferred order in which the candidates
We'll
answer?
continue in the order we had, so Mr. Onkel would be up next.
Okay, Mr. Uncle, first question. Is Colony Pool worth funding if it has lost money the past few years?
The answer is yes, although we've had some good success this year, and I understand there is a lot of revenue that the Colony Pool has obtained this year, so I'm hopeful and grateful that the pool can be, as much as possible, funded through user fees and membership fees. Nonetheless, it is a community and a municipal resource and ought to remain that way.
Okay, question number 2. Do you support the new resident advisory committees, business advisory, affordable housing, and diversity?
Absolutely. As Kathy mentioned, it's a smart way to use the resources that we have in our community. I couldn't expect myself, if I were on the committee, to know all the answers to everything, nor do I think it's reasonable to expect that volunteers would be able to spend enough time to really get to the bottom of so many of the issues facing our community. So if we can leverage talent within our community, why not?
A developer has acquired Noe Pond. What do you think about the potential development of Noe Pond?
Noe Pond is interesting to developers in large part because it's one of the few remaining large parcels in the township. And I think it's interesting for those developers with a view towards using builder's remedy to build multifamily housing on that lot and to really developing Chatham in a way that I think most of us would agree is not appropriate. So to my point of view, we ought to do what we can to make sure that we protect our zoning laws, as we have with our affordable housing work, in order that we maintain our ability to keep Noe Pond area zoned in the way that it is now.
Do you support the 2% open space tax?
Yes.
The master plan is set to be redone in the next year. What are your priorities for the master plan?
Well, I'm not 100% convinced everyone wants to know all the detail of all my views and all the individual pieces of the master plan, which, from what I can tell, includes a lot of chapters. But suffice it to say that overall, the committee ought to be looking comprehensively through the master plan and updating it. And this was something that I raised in my campaign for the Township Committee, and I do hope this committee will take that up, which is to really do a top-to-bottom comprehensive review of that plan with a view of updating it in order that we're better positioned to make good decisions going forward.
Is your primary residence where you spend the majority of each month and more than 180 days per year in Chatham Township?
Yes.
Do you have school-aged K-12 children enrolled in the school district of the Chathams?
Proud to say my twins just graduated from Chatham High School.
Do you plan on moving out of town within the next 6 months?
No.
Have you ever left a job in 6 months or less?
No.
Have you ever left a Chatham Township volunteer position prior to the expiration of its initial term?
No.
Have you previously run for Chatham Township Committee in a primary or general election and lost?
I'm not sure I understand the point of these questions.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the point of the question.
I'm just reading the questions that are being posed by the committee.
I didn't know that was an option.
Are we evaluating the questions?
Yeah.
It's for multiple reasons, for conflicts for one. I think we should know if there's any potential conflicts that a
Mr.
candidate
Hamilton,
would
as you
have.
well know, I have run, like you, and have lost.
Agreed. It's not a secret, you know, but there may be people watching at home that don't know. It's not my question.
As I say,
Excuse me? This is not public
wait.
comment time.
If we can stick to the task at hand, please. The New Jersey Democratic Party website states, in a headline on your party page, the New Jersey Democratic Party is made up of political leaders that drive progressive change across the Garden State. Do you agree?
I don't understand that question, and these questions should be focused on local issues.
These are conflicts.
I've answered the
I don't understand why
question,
that's a conflict.
as I stated in my talking points at the beginning. We're a Chatham Democratic Party, and we're focused on Chatham issues.
Are increased property taxes appropriate for Chatham Township, or in Chatham Township?
Taxes are used to pay for the services that the citizens of Chatham choose to have provided for them.
Is there sufficient affordable housing in Chatham Township?
Probably not.
Is transparency to residents an important principle of conduct for this municipal government?
Yes.
Okay, and those are all the questions.
Yeah, I would remind the candidates also, you don't have to answer the questions if anything makes you uncomfortable or you feel that it's intended to embarrass you. Answer the questions. The decisions are made based on the questions that you answer. So
Okay.
answer what you feel comfortable with.
Okay, question number 1. Is Colony Pool worth funding if it has lost money the past few years?
Yes, I think Colony Pool is worth funding if it's lost money in the past few years, and I am glad it's not lost money this past year, or is not losing money. In the past, I've seen it make money, and so I know it's partly the flow of young families coming to town, but it's also partly how well it's run, and there's always a there's a great chance that it can, for many years, be funded by user fees. And also, if it doesn't make money 1 or 2 years, or occasionally, it fulfills a great function, which is community building. And I am all for providing the municipal leaders adding to the sense of community in Chatham Township.
Do you support the new resident advisory committees, business advisory, affordable housing, and diversity?
Absolutely, and that was in my statement that we should rely on our volunteers, which we already have, and then these new boards that just were added in the last year, because we have a very talented population, and there's a lot of people who we should listen to on specific issues where they're experts.
A developer has acquired Noe Pond. What do you think about the potential development of Noe Pond?
Okay, well, since I'm a planning board member right now, I would not be able to opine on, what I would like to see there. It's all about what's legal, but I am also very conscious of the watershed and it being adjacent to the Great Swamp protected property, so I would be vigilant about that, but as any planning board member should be. And everything else is just according to the way the planning board has to work.
Do you support the 2% open space tax?
Yes. And I would like to point out the proportionality of the open space tax. So that is one reason I support it is because it's not one reason. I would like the public to know that the open space tax is a tiny portion of their tax bill, very tiny. So if it goes up from 1 cent to 2 cents, could be $100 for any individual family. It's not something, in my experience, I've seen that there are people who'd like to call attention to it as something where it's a major portion of the budget when it's not, but it has a major power, which is to preserve our green spaces and give us money to act when something is coming up, and things come up quickly in the real estate world, as we've seen and as we are seeing right now in this past year with these large properties, as we've mentioned.
The master plan is set to be redone in the next year. What are your priorities for the master plan?
Okay, so I actually looked at the master plan online. My priorities would follow the re-exam report of 2017, but I also worked very hard on the circulation element that didn't pass in 2014 when I was working hard for 2 years on it. So that is the most aged piece that needs to be updated. It's from 1999. We're way behind on that. So, and it's almost finished, so we should finish that one. Maybe combine the walkway bikeway plan in the circulation element. Anything, it looks like the land use plan was from 2011, so that's 10 years. It's matured to 10 years and needs an update. We'd have to listen to the professionals on how to proceed. For example, the stormwater plans from 2005, Mr. Rushke would advise us on what, if that's, has state mandated elements, and I know the re-exam report talked about there's been a lot of changes in the state mandated septic rules, and that's part of, let me think, I'm not sure if it is part of stormwater. I think it is, or it's just part of land use. It affects land use. But anyway, there's so many elements, and what the key is that the township committee members have to read the old elements and the proposals for the new elements, and the best practices in other towns. I love this stuff. I would like to do it all.
Is your primary residence where you spend the majority of each month and more than 180 days per year in Chatham Township?
Yes.
Do you have school-aged K through 12 children enrolled in the school district of the Chathams?
I did until a year ago, or a year and a couple months ago, but not anymore.
Do you plan on moving out of the town within the next 6 months?
No.
Have you ever left a job in 6 months or less?
No, but I don't think that applies to the situation anyway.
Have you ever left a Chatham Township volunteer position prior to the expiration of its initial term?
No.
Have you previously run for Chatham Township Committee in a primary or general election and lost?
Yes.
The New Jersey Democratic Party website states in a headline on the Your Party page, the New Jersey Democratic Party is made up of political leaders that drive progressive change across the Garden State. Do you agree?
Well, I will answer the same as Mr. Uncle, that we're concerned with Chatham Township, and the Democrats, the Democrats that I know are the ones who have worked, the people that have been in charge lately, I've worked with before they were on the Township Committee. They've worked so well in schools, they've worked well on the recreation volunteer jobs, and in general, scouting. I've worked with all these people before, and they're getting things done, and I think I'm in very good company by joining them this year.
Are increased property taxes appropriate in Chatham Township?
The Finance Committee every year has to evaluate the budget, look at costs, look at incoming revenue. The people on the Finance Committee have to do a little more work than the rest of the members. It depends on, you have to listen to the administrator. It's not a yes or no answer. It's about being responsible for the finances so that you can pay for things that we need and keep us safe.
Is there sufficient affordable housing in Chatham Township?
I really have not been involved in the affordable housing process in my time on any volunteer committee or on the Township Committee. I know there's a mandate in 2025, and it's a mandate that we must obey, but I certainly have not looked at the details.
Is transparency to residents an important principle of conduct for this municipal government?
Definitely.
And that is the completion of the questions.
Thanks.
Unless if
Thank you.
there's follow-up.
Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I have one. Well, I have two. Mine's for Kathy.
Should I stand up again, Stacy?
Yes, please. That way you can be
Okay.
Okay, you said transparency to the residents is an important principle of conduct in municipal government. In the last meeting, Mark and I called for transparency and a process open to the voting public. We weren't allowing this body to go behind closed doors into executive session, and not only because it contradicts case law, but more importantly because it unnecessarily excludes the residents of the township from matters of public interest. You didn't volunteer to be interviewed as you could have at the last meeting, but you did remain at the meeting and made multiple remarks during the public comment section, and saying that our call for transparency was badly motivated. You also said online that, on a statement online, that Mark and myself are extremists. How do you plan to work with us at those labeled extremists when we insist on transparency and inclusion of the public? And do you think it was a mistake to advocate for inclusion of the public?
Well, you'll find that I am collegial and easy to work with. But from last meeting, I think it was a matter of being, first of all, I was on the Township Committee when we were behind closed doors, and according to tradition and also the Open Public Meetings Act, we interviewed people in the back room there. I remember three people, three Republicans and an all-Republican committee. And then the Township Committee came out and did the vote in public. So that was the tradition, and it was a surprise that suddenly I was invited here and then literally told I had to leave the room within a few minutes. So in that respect, I don't think it was transparent. So it depends on what type of transparency you're talking about. If you want for the public that this be a process for when a Democratic Party Township Committee member needs to be replaced, or for a Republican, and it's followed through because it is a political process. It's not a school board, as one of the case laws that you brought up. It's a political process where the political party has, brings forth the candidates, and it's not a mixed party candidacy. It's only one party. So there's all these traditions, and it was a surprise. It was not transparent at that time. So it all depends on what application of transparent you mean. Not transparent to be surprised and be told to leave when you just were invited and you thought there was a certain process. It is transparent for us to be questioned and have the public hear us, with us being prepared and ready for it. We were not ready because we were not invited to do so. So it's all about fair warning.
Okay. Next question.
You've been a part of the planning board that has approved affordable housing plans. So do you have any idea where you would like to see affordable housing built in our town?
I actually have not been a part of the planning board when they were approving affordable housing, except the one recent one with the final. It was already planned, but there was a phase of it with the one group home across from the Dixie-Dale development, where there's 5 homes and one is an affordable housing group home. So I really have not been involved in affordable housing except that one. It was the final plan approval. It was not anything from the beginning.
Okay. Well, where would you anticipate would be the best location to put additional affordable housing?
Well, from what I understand, the Township Committee in the last few years had created an overlay zone near the downtown area that we have near Hickory Tree. So, yes, I think that when you have affordable housing, or dense housing in general, should be where you have the people who live there not having to drive as many places and being able to walk. It cuts down on traffic. It makes for more profitable shopping for the businesses that are there. So a mixed-use area with dense housing is really smart growth for all of New Jersey and Chatham Township.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have 2 questions also. They're really sort of part 1 and 1A related questions. It has to do with taxes. When asked earlier,
I'm sorry, are these for both?
they're for Mrs. Abbott. I think I know what Phil's position are, with all due respect, and that's fine. But if you feel compelled to answer, that's your prerogative. But I'll ask you, Mrs. Abbott. You were asked, if tax increases were appropriate for a township, and you gave a nuanced answer that more or less could be summed up as it's not a yes or no question, and a lot of things that go into that, but certainly not no. So other than the open space tax, which has recently been increased, and you obviously are a proponent of, can you give us an example of something else not related to open space that you think would warrant a municipal tax increase on the homeowners of Chatham Township?
I really think it's only essential costs that are not being covered, and that's year to year things change. And I remember sitting here at the budget meeting, or was that on Zoom, and hearing that the structure of our debt made it that not every year you pay the same amount. So that was one reason why costs were higher that year, in addition to professional fees related to the mandated affordable housing. So everything is about, just like a household, it's what your costs are for the year that is different from prior years. So, and I do know that it's best to have a flat municipal tax, and when I was on the Township Committee we had that. I also know that sometimes the surplus was manipulated just to have people be able to put that in a campaign platform, that it's flat, it's perfectly flat, or even down a certain penny or something. So I don't believe in manipulating the budget for a campaign. I believe in doing the job to be a responsible steward of the taxpayers' money.
So as we sit here today, you can't think of any specific item that you think would warrant a tax increase specifically? For example, sidewalks in neighborhoods.
Well,
that
we
don't
paid for
currently
them.
have
We paid for
sidewalks.
them with grants. That I have not advocated for sidewalks on, say the neighborhood you and I live in. No, that's not necessary. We already had, according to prior master planning that we're looking at sidewalks on the major roads that are the busiest and most dangerous to pedestrians. So that is absolutely not something sidewalks are extremely expensive. You can't put them on every road. That's not what we want, and we don't need them everywhere. We need them some places.
Your next question?
Yeah, just one more, which is the municipal tax rate has increased by 20% over the last 2 years, as approved by a majority of this committee. I just ask you, do you think a 20% increase in 2 years is reasonable or appropriate?
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a bump that we haven't seen in a long time, but it apparently was necessary, including for maintenance that was deferred, maybe just because the Township Committee didn't want to spend money and for fear of not being reelected. I just think that you should never do something to your own neighbors and friends. This is not a place to be politically ambitious. It's a place to do the right thing. And that means that whatever the budget is, it's only done to manage the township in the most frugal and excellent way.
Okay, thank you. Great. We have Resolution 2021-176, which is the appointing the Township Committee member to fill a vacancy. Can I get a nomination to appoint one of the 3 nominees to the Township Committee to fill the vacancy?
Yeah, is it just a straight nomination or a discussion or how does
There'll be a nomination, a second, and then there'll be a discussion.
Okay, I nominate Mr. Payton. Clearly,
A second.
I nominate Kathy.
Wait, there's a
hold
nomination.
on.
Don't we have to vote?
I have a nomination for Mr. Payton, and you said a
A
second?
second.
Okay, do we have, I thought we do additional nominations.
We can do that for other items, but at this point I would suggest having, unless if you want to do another, we can take them in the order they were.
Yeah, we'll do it that way. So we'll do all the nominations, and then we'll take them in the order that we received them.
Well, I don't understand. I made a motion and it was seconded, and I don't understand why we're not voting on that motion. My motion is that Mr. Payton's name be inserted into the resolution.
Yes,
Second.
we're going to vote on that resolution, but we're going to find out all the nominations first.
Is that appropriate? Albert?
Albert?
For some reason, my video's not going on. Hold on.
There you are.
There has been a motion, there has been a second. The next step is to debate, and if that motion passes, then that is the end of the nomination process. If that motion fails, then you go to the next candidate.
Okay, thank you. I apologize, I had different guidance before. Okay, so up for discussion.
Okay, well, I would say that, in my view, at least, that, the 3 candidates that were proffered by Mr. Ankel and the Democratic Committee, including himself, hardly, were 3 legitimate candidates, including himself, giving a campaign speech in favor of Mrs. Abbott when given the opportunity to speak. And I was a little bit surprised, frankly, that he proffered as a justification for why Mrs. Abbott should be put on this committee without being elected by the citizens of Township is because she is the current Democratic nominee. I couldn't possibly disagree with that more. And in fact, I feel the exact opposite. In my view, there's a lot of talk in this country today about, election manipulation and election, meddling and this, that, and the other thing. And the idea of having a stalwart Democrat step down just before the end of her term, on the basis that she's moving, I get that, it's a free country, and to install onto this committee on an unelected basis the current candidate that the Democratic Party has put up for this very position, and who in 3 to 4 scant months from now, the people of Chatham Township will have the opportunity to choose for themselves whether or not they welcome Mrs. Abbott on the committee. She has set forth her credentials. I'm sure she will continue to do so, as will the Republican candidate over the next several months. But in my view, it is wholly inappropriate political pandering and maneuvering to place the Democratic candidate onto this committee without having the public have an opportunity to make that election and selection process in November. And as far as Mr. Ankel goes, I mean, obviously, he doesn't really want the job, and, you know, he was on the ballot just the exact flip side, a few short months ago, and people had an opportunity to vote on that too. So I found Mr. Payton's honesty, where he said, you know, I'm willing to be impartial and delve into these issues, and he's not, you know, proffering, you know, partisan electioneering, but just giving his honest answers. You know, I think he's an appropriate placeholder just for the next couple months, and then in November, the people of Chatham Township will have the opportunity to choose what direction they want this committee to take.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, well, a couple of things. Paul Payton is, you know, a wonderful person, and I think, you know, I would be happy at any point to have him on the committee, but at this time, Kathy Abbott clearly, in my mind, has the qualifications. She's been on the committee. She has more experience on a township committee than any of us sitting up here. And in terms of transparency and the voters, there's no better way for the voters to evaluate Mrs. Abbott than to have her up here in the public venue for 4 months, making decisions, speaking publicly, voting,
Why
so
don't
that
you
it's
step
measurable.
down and we'll put the Republican candidate on too, and then they really get chances. And we're not going to agree on this, I don't think.
Oh, well, yeah, well, that's why
But-
there's a discussion.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Any other points?
On Paul Payton?
Yes, well,
Okay. I mean, I'm fine with just voting on Paul Payton. Is that how we're doing it? We're just going the first and then the second?
Oh, yeah, the motion on the floor now is for appointing Paul Payton.
Okay.
okay. So if everybody's ready, we'll do a roll call vote.
Mrs. Felice?
Yes.
Mr. Hamilton?
Yes.
Mrs. Fandacco?
No.
Deputy Mayor Ewald?
No.
Motion fails.
Okay, and then Mrs. Fondacco had made a nomination earlier when we cut her off,
Yes, I want you nominate Kathy Abbott.
and I'll second that nomination. Is there any discussion?
Well, I don't
Any
want to
further
belabor the
discussion?
point I already made. I have very strong feelings about this too. I think it's inappropriate, wholly inappropriate.
I can tell you my issue and concern is that I don't see her having an ability to work with us. I think after last meeting, when she immediately posted a statement online calling us extremists, like I could not be further from an extremist. And if you already have that assumption about half the committee, I see it as being, we've already dealt with someone on the committee who excluded us from every single aspect. And I see that as being the same. So,
Yeah. I mean, again, Kathy has a 3-year history of working on the committee successfully. She's worked on the planning board successfully. She's definitely the most qualified person for the position. To say that there's concerns because she is running is a political statement. We're looking for somebody who's qualified to fill the position. We've got important stuff to do, and we want somebody who's able to help make those decisions, who's going to get their hands dirty. And she's the most qualified person.
Well, state law requires the local Democratic Party to proffer 3 candidates. So it's your position that Mr. Onkel proffered unqualified candidates? You know, we were given, this is admittedly a political process.
Yeah,
We know going in
obviously
this,
they're all qualified candidates.
Okay, well then I think
you know,
we
let's not
should
be
work
rude.
as a committee. We're always talking about bipartisanship and transparency. We're talking about 3 short months here, and it's our duty, it's incumbent on us, I think, as a split committee in the spirit of cooperation, to acknowledge that the Democratic Party has the right to put forth 3 candidates, and we should work together collaboratively to try and find one of those 3 candidates that we can agree on. And that's what Mrs. Felice and I are trying to do, rather than just thwart this thing. You know, I would anticipate that any individual that Mr. Onkel and his committee proffered as a candidate was somebody who at least one Democratic member of this committee would not reject. That's what I thought. So we're trying to compromise here by supporting, you know.
Yeah, I mean, you
and
went
obviously
through an
I don't
elaborate.
agree with
yeah.
Mr. Payton about most things. I don't know him well personally, but you know, we're trying to compromise here on somebody who we think is not as I think all the candidates are qualified, and we're trying to find somebody who is the least, you know, controversial.
I don't understand why there was an elaborate questioning process to differentiate the candidates in that case.
wanted to see
Okay.
if I heard anything that changed my mind.
Uh,
Didn't.
Okay.
Our questions were yes, no questions. They weren't that elaborate. And then we had 2 follow-ups. That was it. It wasn't like we went,
Do we have any other?
I don't have any other
discussion?
comments.
Okay, roll call vote.
Mrs. Felice?
No.
Mr. Hamilton?
No.
Mrs. Fondacco?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Ewald?
Yes.
Motion fails.
Do we have any other nominations? Okay, in that case, we are unable to fill the vacancy for the Township Committee member. Very disappointing that we cannot get that accomplished tonight. We have a lot of things that we need to get done. As a result, we will not be moving on to the other items on the agenda. Those will be carried. The decision for the open position on the Chatham Township Committee will be made by the Chatham Township Democratic Committee. They have 15 days from the deadline, which is 15 days from this Sunday, which was this committee's deadline, to submit that person's name. And as soon as they submit that person's name, they can be sworn in and hopefully join us as soon as possible on this dais. So I think the next thing we have, correct me if I'm wrong, we are moving to the hearing of citizens?
Yes.
Great. Okay, I just have to read some guidelines. Meeting access is guided by the state of emergency and the related governor's executive orders. At this time, the committee meeting room is open to the public, and we look forward to having you join us at your convenience. Under the executive orders, this meeting is also being made available for public participation remotely. If you are watching via cable TV on Comcast Channel 29 or FiOS Channel 26, you can participate in the public comment sessions of this meeting by dialing any of the phone numbers which are listed on the agenda and which will be shown on your TV screen when we get to the public comment sessions. Then dial star 9 to raise your hand. If you are watching via Zoom, you may speak during any of the public comment sessions by following the Zoom instructions to raise your hand. Whether in person or online, when you are recognized to speak, please mind the following procedures. Please say your name, spell your last name, and give the name of your street. You do not need to give your street number. Any public comments will be limited to 5 minutes. Rather than use any of your time answering questions, we'll wait until you finish speaking before responding. We don't have 2 public comment sessions, skip that. Each member of the public is limited to 1 comment of up to 5 minutes. Written comments submitted to the Township Clerk before 3 p.m. today will be read during the public comment session. Written comments are subject to the same guidelines as oral comments. Duplicative written comments may be summarized rather than read in full, according to guidelines issued by the New Jersey Division of Local Government Services. Okay, Mr. LeConte, do we have any emailed comments that were sent in?
Yes, we do. Let me just quick activate my camera. First, from Natalia Lacey. She writes, I'm writing in support of Kathy Abbott being confirmed to the Township Committee. Kathy is an exceptionally qualified candidate in experience, education, and temperament. As a resident of Chatham Township, I voted for Kathy Abbott in the primary, and I would like to see her installed in the Township Committee. Next up is from Melissa Cavallone.
Greg, can I interrupt? Can you clarify what the parameters are on the agenda of the subject matter of the public comment period?
During the public comment, it can be anything that's not scheduled for a separate public hearing. And we don't have anything on for a separate public hearing, no ordinances. Like, typically if there's an ordinance, it has a dedicated public hearing, but otherwise the public can comment on anything. So from Melissa Cavallone, let's see, I wanted to comment on the qualifications and character of Kathy Abbott, who the Democratic Committee is looking to place in the Township Committee spot being vacated by Tracy Ness. I have lived in Chatham for 14 years now, and I have seen the process play out when Kevin Tubbs and John Maurer moved. I do not mind the change in procedure, but I do wish it to be addressed as a policy change before the situation arose, since it is so important to the two new members. Regardless, I have known Kathy Abbott for most of those 14 years. At SBS, we worked on the PTO's environmental committee together. Kathy continued to focus on environmental concerns at the schools. I watched as she created and won grants for sidewalks to keep our children safe on their way to school. We discussed her work on the Township Committee as well. There's literally no one more qualified in the Township to take on such a role of filling a new seat, and filling the seat for a few months before the election. Kathy is the correct choice for our kids, our environment, and our government. Thank you. Next up is from Diane DeBrule. She says, I am unable to attend the meeting, but would appreciate having my comments below read into the record as follows. I write in support of the candidacy of Kathy Abbott to fill Tracy Ness's vacant position on the Township Committee. I have known Kathy for 12 years. My husband and I have both volunteered with her. I know her to be intelligent, well-rounded, and well-informed, and a tireless and dedicated worker for the betterment of our community. She is thoughtful, and her opinions and actions tend to be grounded in research and thorough review of information. Perhaps most importantly, she is courteous and civil, and has appreciation for process and rules of order. She's an advocate for transparency, good governance, and respect. She'll do a great job for the residents of Chatham Township. And I see the Fechner's are here, so instead of reading their message, I will let them speak for themselves at the microphone.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for making it possible to have this public now instead of later. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm Sarah Fechner, Rolling Hill Drive in Chatham Township. Kathy came, and a lot of you have already heard about her immense qualifications and her experience, so I won't go through them, other than to say that she has a historical trove of knowledge, which is so needed. She's also fiscally responsible. She's a trained economist who knows how to read budgets and projections. She does her homework. She's detail-oriented, and she looks at the big picture. She doesn't really care if you're Republican or you're Democrat. It doesn't matter. What she wants is the best interests of these citizens of this township, both short-term and long-term. No kicking the can down the road, as was done in the past. But to me, most refreshingly in these polarized times, Ms. Abbott conducts herself with utmost professionalism. Even if she ultimately doesn't agree with your view, she will listen with an open mind and not think there's some hidden agenda or somebody is trying to get something past her. She is a credit to our citizens when she represents the township. I have had neighbors who never watched these township meetings before, and they have started to watch them on TV. They're bored. They were in, isolation due to COVID. And they really noticed great conduct and not great conduct. And I don't want to ask anybody else to look at our meetings and not feel proud. And that's what Kathy will do. So thank you for letting me say this, because that's my personal experience with Kathy, and I haven't known her that many years. So thank you. And I do have one question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
How did Typhoon Celine get on? Celine, I can never pronounce his name. Wasn't it behind closed doors? I mean, isn't this always been the history of how we do it?
In terms of the process that was done in the past, it was done in executive session.
Right.
Towns do different things.
I know, I meant our town.
Yeah,
Right.
some of them do it in private and executive session, some of it have a quasi process. But the reality is, the work that we have to do going forward is critical. And I would not want to put the township in the position of having its decisions reversed if the process is challenged. So that's why I said early on that we wanted to err on the side of the Open Public Meetings Act.
Right.
You default to an open public meeting. So, you know, it's debatable, and in other towns, they will continue to do it in private executive session. But we were not going to put this committee at risk, given everything that we have to do. That's of importance. And thankfully, the three nominees were very cooperative and willing to participate. And it was very difficult for them because, you know, as we know, in a full Republican committee, any Republican nominee was able to go into private executive session, and any embarrassing questions like, did you leave a job before 6 months, would have been asked in private.
Right.
So, yeah, it was, and that's also why we decided not to do it at the last meeting, because they weren't expecting it, and it wouldn't have been fair, and we decided to kind of evaluate the situation and then bring it to a public session. But going forward, now that this committee has decided that it needs to be in the public, it will be in the public going forward.
Good, then you can hear what the public thinks before you vote. Thank you.
And if I can just clarify with when Mr. Solen was appointed, it was the interviews that were in executive session, but the actual appointment and the vote was in public session?
Yes.
Hi, good evening. I'm Christina Mott at Nicholson Drive in Chatham Township. I wanted to thank all the candidates for being flexible and participating in the new selection process. I have to say some of the questions seem to be asked with the sole purpose of embarrassing the candidates. Transparency in governance is meant to help the public engage with the government and to understand decision-making and processes. Going out of your way to embarrass people makes people feel uncomfortable and unwilling to participate. Further, painting the state legal procedure for selecting an appointee as some sort of manipulation is disgraceful. The Democratic Committee found 3 excellent candidates and offered them in good faith. Mr. Payton and Mr. Onkel presented themselves honestly, and their choice to express why they think Kathy Abbott is the logical choice should not have been twisted. I hope that Kathy would be appointed tonight because she will be an excellent and collegial committee woman. Kathy will put residents first and will treat everyone with respect. She would never embarrass anyone for sport. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs.
Why do we keep referring to the 3 candidates? There was clearly only one candidate.
Right.
Okay,
Mr. Uncle was not
public-
even nominated.
We're in the public hearing portion.
Well,
okay?
I'm responding to the comment, and it was directed at me, and it was inflammatory and insulting, and I don't think I did anything to embarrass anybody or conducted myself in a way that was at all inappropriate. But I do think it's ridiculous, frankly, to keep talking about the 3 candidates. There was only one candidate that the other 2 members of this committee were even willing to consider. We were open to considering the other candidates. One of them was rejected, which you know, talk about, you know, being impolite to somebody. You know, he had an opportunity to be put on this committee, and you refused to do so, and the other one didn't even get nominated. So there really was only one candidate. Would be the only thing I would say in response to that.
Okay, Mr. Kelly?
Good evening, Mike Kelly, 67 Mountain Avenue, and my comments tonight are based on experience that includes 6 years on the Township Committee, 1 year as Deputy Mayor, and 1 year as Mayor. And based on that experience on the Township Committee, I'd like to respectfully request that the Township Committee reopen the process, that the motion and second to reconsider a candidate for appointment to the Township Committee. And I make that request for 2 reasons. One is that there's been important new information that came out tonight, and that includes the candidate statements and the answers that they gave to the questions. And yes, those statements and answers did immediately precede the motions and the votes that were taken tonight, but they really did not allow for a lot of time to digest and weigh the answers, including the fact that 2 out of the 3 candidates that were presented by the Democratic Committee, both of them endorsed Kathy Abbott as the strongest of the candidates. And no, I would ask that all 4 Township Committee members take advantage of this extra time to digest that new information and re-vote on the selected, the person to select for the appointment. The other new information was the comments by the public, which unfortunately, the way the agenda was set up, is now coming after the vote, so that our comments were not able to be taken into consideration before the vote. So there's valuable new information that came in the comments that were sent directly to the clerk and also that were being made here tonight. And third, the new information is that the way the two motions proceeded tonight is that the vote for Kathy Abbott came second. And the way the votes came down is the two members of the Township Committee who are Democrats voted for Kathy Abbott. The two members of the Township Committee who are Republicans voted for Paul Payton. I think that now it's very clear which candidate the Democratic Party believes is the strongest of the three candidates and which candidate will be endorsed when and if this is sent back to the Democratic Party. And that's valuable information now. Comments were made tonight that it's important for Township Committee members to be able to work together and to compromise. And I think that the information on the table now is that we know if it goes back to the Democratic Party, who will be the name that comes forward again. There's a second reason why I ask that you reconsider and reopen the vote, and that is in the interest of transparency. We've heard a lot about transparency here at the last meeting and tonight. In the interest of transparency, members of the Township Committee rejected the legal advice of their own Township Attorney, who advised that because to avoid personal type questions, that the discussion and the interviews should be taken in private the way they've always been done, and that only the vote should be done in public. But in the interest of transparency, which the Republican members of the Township Committee felt was of the highest priority, that was rejected, the advice of the Township Committee. The second interest of transparency, the Republican members of the Township Committee rejected the precedent of how vacancies have been filled by previous Republican administrations, Republican majority Township Committees for decades. Again, because they felt strongly that transparency was of utmost importance. And the third reason why, in the interest of transparency, you should accept your responsibility and vote again to fill this position is because if you don't, if this 2-2 deadlock remains, the process required by the state will send this process back to, in this case, the Democratic Party, and that selection process by the Democratic Party will not be taken in public. It will not be broadcast on Zoom. It will not be broadcast on cable TV. It will be made by them and presented as a fait accompli to the Township Committee. So if the priority of the Township Committee is transparency, I think for all of these reasons, it is vital that the Township Committee accept its responsibility as the elected representatives of all of the Township residents, and that some of you, one of you, make the motion to return and vote again for and select a person to fill this vacancy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Kelly, I have tremendous respect for your opinion, and I appreciate your input. I can't imagine anybody's changing their vote on this dais. Yeah.
Before we move on from here to citizens, we have one more on Zoom, unless anyone else in the audience wants to come up.
Does anybody else want to come up? Thank you, but thank you, Mayor Kelly. I won't put the candidates through that again because nobody's going to change their mind, but I appreciate your input.
Well, nobody's going to change their mind about the view on what is seen as a critical issue in the soon-to-be happening election. But, you know, when you talk about transparency and new information, I think the new information tonight is that the three candidates that were proffered by Mr. Ackle and his committee were a sham. There were not three candidates.
There were three candidates submitted, and that's inappropriate to say that.
And he made it, the former mayor, and I appreciate you being here, Mayor, and it's easy to walk away, and it's good that people remain involved, you know, implied that there was no willingness to compromise here, and there was willingness to compromise. The Democratic Committee nominated three candidates, and Mrs. Felice and I unanimously were willing to support one of them. That's compromise. the other members of the committee were not willing to compromise.
You have to support one of them. There's 3 Democratic candidates. You have to pick one
And we did.
or pick none.
We could have picked none.
We could have
We
picked
did
none.
pick one in the spirit of cooperation. But I agree with
Okay.
you, Mrs. Ewald, I don't think that there's point in
Yeah,
that
and I
procedure.
take offense to those nominees being a sham, just so, because you are relatively new to the Chatham Township political process. There were the former placements, there's been at least 3 placements that I'm aware of on the Republican side. There were people who never showed up. There were people who had no interest in the job. There were people who showed up. To call this process a sham after
Has there ever been-
after the representatives showed up, they answered questions, they showed up twice, they went through a process, I think it's insulting. They went through an elaborate process.
With all due
For your
respect,
evaluation,
Stacy,
I think it's inappropriate to
they were
call it a sham.
nominated by their own party, they went through the process, and then 2 Republican members of this committee were willing to accept them, and you rejected them, okay?
So what, you're going to reject, so you say otherwise you reject all 3? Everybody has a choice on this committee.
No.
Moving on, we're not going to solve this.
Okay?
We do have
Okay,
a resident on Zoom with reason.
yes, please.
Last 4 digits of the phone number are 7778. You're live. Stuart, is that you?
Yes, hi, this is Stuart Carr calling from 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham Township. Thank you to everybody for going through the process here tonight. I think net the idea of having an open process with the vetting of the candidates is a good thing, so I appreciate Mrs. Felice and Mr. Hamilton bringing that to the fore there a couple of weeks ago. I assume going forward now that unless they say otherwise, Mrs. Felice and Mr. Hamilton will duly and enthusiastically approve the same type of format when we have a Republican scenario in 2023 or 2032 or whenever. If there's anything different from that, I'd like to hear. But otherwise, again, it does end up being in Democrat control. I think, again, the Republicans have agreed to disagree on that, so then just let the process play out. But net, I think, again, overall, having this in public, notwithstanding the issue of some embarrassing questions, et cetera, I think is a good thing. So I appreciate Mrs. Felice and Mr. Hamilton bringing that, to the fore. But again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If they disagree with this in the Republican context, I'd like them to say that. But otherwise, I assume they would enthusiastically agree with that going forward. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I enthusiastically agree. It should always be in the public, always. And I think every time that there's a public hearing of citizens, there's always a chance of embarrassing questions. There's always, you never know what question is going to come up. And you get embarrassing questions sometimes, and you have to be able to handle them. And if you can't, then you probably shouldn't be here. So I don't think any of my questions were embarrassing.
No, to the extent there was a question from Mr. Carr, yes, I enthusiastically and wholeheartedly endorse this process now and forever. I hope it won't come up that often, but I understand that it does. And I would just second Mrs. Felice's comments that I didn't find any of those questions particularly embarrassing, particularly in the context of recent events. And the last thing we need is to, point somebody to this committee who has got one foot out the door of this town. We recently had a situation where somebody was proffered the mayorship, could have respectfully declined, but decided not to. But I'm not going to say it there. But so I did not think the questions were embarrassing.
Okay.
But yes, Mr. Carr, wholeheartedly agree.
Do we have anybody else on Zoom who would like to speak?
We do not have any other hands raised at the moment.
Okay. Then in that case, seeing no other members of the public stepping forward, I'll close out the hearing of citizens. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.